was 21 and I needed money badly enough to take a job I didn't want. Closing shift. Gas station. 3 towns over from where I lived. Sitting at the edge of a dark stretch of highway with a patch of dense woods running along the entire left side of the building. The pay was just enough to justify the drive. The plan was to stay a few months, save what I could, and figure out the rest of my life from there. The days were fine. Snacks, cigarettes, lottery tickets, the rhythm of a small store with enough foot traffic to keep your brain occupied. The nights were different. After 9, the lot went quiet and the darkness outside pressed against the glass in a way that made the inside feel like a fishbowl. Too bright in here, too dark out there. Every customer who came in after dark felt slightly off in a way I could never put a clean word to. Not dangerous necessarily, just wrong. Like they had come from somewhere that didn't quite exist. I had been working the closing shift alone for 6 weeks before that night. Nothing had ever happened. I had gotten comfortable. That was probably the mistake. It started with the phone. 9:30, the store was empty. I was restocking the cooler in the back when I heard it ring. I walked out and picked it up without thinking. The voice on the other end was low and stretched out the way someone sounds when they're doing a bad impression of a movie killer. Forced. Theatrical. It asked me if I was alone in the store. I almost laughed. I said something sarcastic. Told it, yeah, you got me. Then I hung up. I texted my friends immediately, asked which one of them was calling the store pretending to be a serial killer. They all denied it immediately. The usual back and forth. Someone said they were home. Someone sent a photo from their basement. I assumed they were covering for each other and trying to keep the bit going. 10 minutes later, it rang again. Same voice. It asked why I hung up. I gave the same sarcastic reply. Then it laughed. That was the moment things shifted. The laugh was quiet and completely controlled. It didn't sound like someone enjoying a prank. It sounded like someone enjoying something else entirely. Something I couldn't name. Then it said I shouldn't be rude to people who know where I am. I hung up. But this time I put the phone down slowly. I stood there for a moment with my hand still resting on the receiver. The store was silent except for the hum of the coolers. I looked out through the glass at the parking lot. Empty. Just the pumps under the yellow lights and the road beyond, and the darkness where the woods started. I told myself it was still a prank. Customers kept trickling in and the movement helped. People buying beer, paying for gas, scratching lottery tickets on the counter before walking out. Normal sounds, normal people. Every time the store emptied out again, I found myself watching the phone. It rang a third time at 10:40. The voice asked if the store always got this quiet this late. I felt that one in my chest. Not because it was threatening, because it was accurate. The store was quiet. I was alone. And whoever was on the other end of that line was observing it in real time. They could see the parking lot, or they were close enough to know what was happening inside without being able to see it. Either way, they were not calling from across town. I hung up and texted my friends again, this time individually. One was with his girlfriend. One sent me a time-stamped photo from a different city. One was at someone's house, 45 minutes away. None of them were anywhere near me. After the 5th call, I stopped answering. The phone would ring and I would stand behind the counter watching it, letting it stop on its own. Then a minute or two later, it would start again. 15 minutes of this. The store completely silent between rings, except for the sound of my own breathing. I started checking the cameras. 4 outside, 3 inside. The exterior footage was grainy and full of blind spots. The side of the building near the woods was almost entirely black on the monitor. I flipped between feeds obsessively, expecting to catch a face I recognized, crouched outside, getting ready to give me a scare. I saw nothing, but I started hearing things. A tap somewhere along the side wall, low and irregular. Then what sounded like a slow scrape near the back corner of the building. Then from somewhere behind the store, the soft crunch of someone stepping onto loose gravel. Deliberate, unhurried. The specific sound of someone who's not trying to get anywhere quickly. Someone who is content to just be close. Every time I told myself it was wind or the building or an animal, the sound would come again at a slightly different location, mapping the perimeter. That's what it felt like something circling. At 11:40, the door opened. The sound made me flinch even though I'd been watching the lot and saw him approach, late 20s, maybe 30. Nothing about him would stop you on the street. Clean enough. Ordinary jacket, ordinary shoes. He didn't say hello and he didn't go directly to any shelf. He moved through the store the way water moves around something, drifting, pausing, appearing at the end of one aisle, then another. Every few minutes, I would see the top half of his face rise above the shelf line and look toward the counter. Not browsing, checking, confirming I was still there. I watched him on the monitors while pretending to organize the area behind the register. He spent 9 minutes in the store. He bought 1 bag of chips. When he brought it to the counter, he said nothing. I took it and scanned it without looking up. When I finally did look up, he was already staring directly at me. Not a glance, not a look. Direct, unbroken eye contact with no expression behind it. He held it for 2 full seconds. 2 seconds is a very long time when someone's face gives you nothing to interpret. Then he looked down, paid, picked up the bag, and walked toward the door. I exhaled. Then he stopped. He was halfway through the door when he stopped and turned his head back toward me. Without rotating his body, his chin dropped slightly. His eyes came up to find mine from that angle, and then he smiled. I have never been able to fully describe that smile to anyone who wasn't there. It was not embarrassed. It was not friendly. It was the smile of someone who knows exactly how unsettling they look and has decided to be as unsettling as possible, on purpose. It lasted maybe 1 second. Then he stepped outside. Instead of walking toward the pumps, he walked around the left side of the building, the side that faced the woods. He kept his eyes on me through the glass the entire time, still smiling. He reached the corner and disappeared. I pulled up the side camera immediately. I watched him around the building and walked directly into the blind spot. He did not come back out. I waited 30 seconds. A full minute. 2 minutes. Nothing. The tree line was dark and still, and he had simply ceased to exist on any camera I had access to. I locked the front door. I texted everyone in my phone. Family, friends, anyone I could think of. I told them there was a situation at the store, and that if I stopped responding, they needed to call the police and give them this address. I barely finished the closing checklist. I kept my eyes on every monitor simultaneously and saw nothing move for 20 minutes. At midnight, I grabbed my things and stood at the front door. Relocking from the outside took maybe 15 seconds. It was the longest 15 seconds I have ever experienced. The lot was empty and quiet, and the darkness near the woods was complete. I turned and ran to my car. I was almost there when I heard them. Footsteps, fast, not running. Something more controlled than running. The deliberate slapping rhythm of someone covering ground at maximum speed without breaking into a sprint. Like they had done this before and knew that running looks panicked, but this doesn't. He came from the front corner of the building. I don't remember opening the car door. I remember being inside it with the engine on and my foot already on the gas. I reversed hard and cut the wheel. And when I looked in the mirror, he was standing in the center of the lot, standing completely still, watching me leave, with the same patient expression he'd had inside the store. No urgency, no frustration, just watching, like he had all the time in the world. Like this was not the last time. I called my boss the next morning. He reviewed the footage. He told me the customer looked normal to him. He said I had probably connected things that weren't connected because the phone calls had already put me on edge. I quit before he finished the sentence. I still believe the voice on the phone and the man in the store were the same person. I cannot prove it. But I was inside that building alone, listening to someone describe how quiet it was getting. I was the one who watched him walk into the woods and never come out. I was the one who heard those footsteps in the dark parking lot. Some things you don't need proof of. You just need to drive away fast enough. My name is Danny, and I have worked the bar alone on weeknights for 3 years. The place is a small dive off the highway, the kind of spot where the regulars sit in the same seats every time, and the jukebox plays the same rotation of classic rock it has been playing since before I was born. Most nights, it is predictable in the way that only a very specific kind of bar can be predictable. Truckers passing through, locals unwinding, the occasional lost traveler looking for something strong and a place to sit for an hour. I know how to read every type that comes through the door. I know the talkers and the quiet ones and the ones who want to be left completely alone. I know within 60 seconds of someone sitting down whether the night is going to stay calm or not. The man in the black turtleneck sat down after 1 in the morning on a Tuesday, and I clocked him immediately. Late 40s. Extraordinarily clean cut for that hour in that kind of bar. Black turtleneck under a long, dark coat. The posture of someone who has never once slouched in a chair. He carried himself with the specific kind of ease that comes from having never had to worry about money. Not the loud, performative ease of someone who wants you to know. The quiet, settled kind. The kind that doesn't need you to notice at all. He sat down and ordered something top shelf without looking at the menu. He asked me if I liked working here. I told him honestly that I did. We talked for a few minutes. He was attentive in a way that felt genuine. He asked good questions and listened to the answers. The kind of man you might describe to a friend the next day as surprisingly interesting. Then he asked what I did after my shift. I gave him something vague and started wiping down the counter. He didn't push. He just smiled in a way that suggested the answer didn't particularly matter to him, like he already knew something I didn't. He drained his drink, placed a crisp $100 bill on the bar like it was a receipt, and walked out without another word. I thought about the encounter on my drive home. There was nothing I could point to. Nothing he had said or done that crossed any line, just a feeling. The specific feeling of having been assessed by someone who was very good at not showing that they were doing it. I filed it away and moved on. He came back a week later. He brought a woman with him. She was mid-30s and dressed in a way that was slightly but deliberately off. Trendy in a calculated way. Like someone had studied what a younger crowd wore and replicated it carefully, but without quite understanding why any of it worked. She moved differently than most people who come into a bar, too fluid, too aware of the space around her. She sat down, and before she ordered anything, she leaned across the bar and told me I was so pretty. Her fingers brushed my arm as she said it, and stayed there a half-second longer than any casual touch should last. I thanked her and took a small step back. The man said nothing. He sat slightly behind her and to the left and watched the room. He did not look at me directly once during the entire visit. That was almost stranger than if he had. The woman asked me questions. How long had I worked here? How old was I? Did I ever think about doing something different? Did I live nearby? She threaded them into conversation naturally enough that I answered 2 of them before I realized what the rhythm felt like. Not small talk. Intake. She was building something with every answer I gave her. Then she lowered her voice and leaned in close. She told me she ran an exclusive private events company. She said she was always looking for young women for weekend parties. She said the pay was $10,000 for 2 days. She said it like she was doing me a favor, like I should feel grateful she had noticed me. I laughed and told her it sounded too good to be true. She said it was completely real. She said other girls just like me did it all the time. Her smile stayed exactly the same through every word, fixed and wide and completely disconnected from her eyes. She steered the conversation back in circles. Fun, safe, exclusive. The same 3 words appearing in slightly different arrangements, like she had memorized a script and trusted that repetition would eventually work. Then she said it. She said I should step outside for a moment, that there was someone who could explain the opportunity better than she could. Everything in me went quiet. I told her I was good. No softness in it, no apology, just no. A group of customers pushed through the door at that exact moment. The woman's smile slipped for a fraction of a second. Just a fraction. Then she turned to the man and they left without finishing their drinks. I called my boss that night and told him everything. He said to keep an eye out. He reminded me he was 15 minutes away. He pointed out that they hadn't technically done anything illegal and that the cameras above the bar were visible enough to deter most problems. I told myself he was right. 3 nights later, after closing, I walked to my car and found a vehicle parked across the street with its engine off. I could not see anyone inside. I sat in my car for a moment watching it. I pulled out of the lot. It followed. Not aggressively, just steadily. Far enough back to be almost invisible. Close enough to always be there. I took a turn I didn't need to take. Still there. I took another. Still there. My hands were completely steady on the wheel and my mind was very calm in the specific way that only happens when your body has decided the panic is a luxury it cannot afford right now. I drove to the nearest police station and pulled into the lot without signaling. The car accelerated and was gone before I reached the entrance. I sat in the police parking lot for 40 minutes before I drove home. 2 weeks of silence. I started to wonder if it was over. I started to relax slightly, which I think was exactly what they were waiting for. She came back on a slow weeknight just before midnight, walked in alone, sat at the bar, folded her hands neatly in front of her like we had a scheduled appointment. Same fixed smile, same eyes that weren't in it. I texted my boss under the counter without looking down. She asked for a drink. I figured making it would buy me enough time. I turned to reach for the bottle. I heard the front door click shut. I turned back. She was gone. The bar stool was empty. Through the front glass, I could see a dark van sitting with its engine running directly outside the entrance. I locked the front door. The deadbolt had barely caught when something hit the back door from the outside. Not a knock. The specific impact of someone throwing their weight against a metal door to test whether it will give. Then again. Then the sound of the handle being forced back and forth. I grabbed the heaviest object within reach and called 911. I stood in the center of the bar calculating the distance to the front door. The van was still visible through the glass. Someone was almost certainly waiting on the other side of it. Headlights cut across the front window. My boss's car swung into the lot. The back door went silent. The van pulled out hard with a shriek of tires and disappeared before he had fully stopped. When the police reviewed the footage, they found what I had not known was happening, while the woman sat calmly at my bar making conversation. Two masked figures had been crouching beside the front entrance the entire time, waiting. A third person was at the back door. The plan was precise. Flush me toward the front through the back door. The two figures take me before I reach my car. The van is already running. The plates came back unregistered. My boss does not schedule me alone anymore, but what stays with me is not the van or the masked figures or the sound of that back door. What stays with me is the smile. How it never once changed. How she sat at my bar with her hands folded and her smile in place, while two people crouched just outside the glass, waiting for the signal. She was so calm. That kind of calm takes practice. I worked the overnight shift at a large retail store, electronics section. It's quieter than the rest of the floor after midnight. The overhead lights hum at a frequency you stop hearing after the first hour, and the customers who come in at that time are mostly harmless. Night owls, insomniacs, truckers grabbing cables and chargers before getting back on the road. I had worked that shift long enough that nothing surprised me anymore. That was my mistake. I noticed him because he wasn't shopping. Every time I looked up from what I was doing, he was nearby. Not in a way I could immediately call suspicious. Just present. The next aisle over. By the clearance end cap. Near the display cases at the far end of my section. He never picked anything up. He never looked at any product on any shelf. His eyes moved only when I moved. I told myself I was reading into it. The store was large and quiet, and the nights had a way of making ordinary things feel weighted, but the pattern continued. He was always positioned at the edge of my sight line, always just far enough to claim it was coincidence if confronted, always just close enough that I could not stop noticing him. I reached for my radio to call someone. The batteries were dead. I was trying to decide whether to walk to the front and find a manager when I felt a hand close firmly around my arm from behind. I came very close to screaming. But before I could react, a woman's voice rang out across the aisle. Loud, warm, completely familiar. She said my name like she had been looking for me for 20 minutes and was relieved to finally find me. She launched into a story about losing me near the back of the store. She spoke with the casual ease of someone who has known you for years. I had never seen her in my life. Before I could respond, she leaned in close and dropped her voice to something urgent and low. She said the man had been recording me on his phone for the past 30 minutes. She said I needed to follow her right now. She said it with the specific energy of someone who has assessed a situation quickly and already decided what needs to happen next. I looked back. The man was no longer pretending to browse. He was standing completely still in the middle of the aisle, looking directly at me. No pretense left. I let her lead me. Her grip on my arm was firm and practiced. She kept her voice loud and cheerful as she steered me through the store, chatting about nothing, keeping up the performance of two friends navigating a large store together. I was genuinely grateful. I kept thinking about how rare it was for a stranger to put herself in the middle of someone else's situation. How lucky I was that she had been there and noticed and decided to help. I didn't look at where we were going for several minutes. When I did look up, I felt the floor shift under me. We had passed the main registers. The self-checkouts were behind us. The areas of the store with the most foot traffic and the most cameras were all behind us. Ahead of us was the warehouse section. Dim, quiet, mostly empty at this hour. And beyond it, I could see the side exit door, the one without cameras, the one that opens directly onto the side parking lot where the loading bays are, where there are no other employees and no line of sight from the store interior. I planted my feet. She kept moving and my arm pulled taut. I twisted against her grip. She smiled and told me to come on, just a little further. Her fingers tightened. I twisted harder, and her grip shifted but didn't release. She was strong in a way that suggested the grip was not accidental. She had done this before. The grip, the root, the friendly voice covering the movement. All of it had the smoothness of repetition. I screamed. Not a word. Not for help. Just sound. As loud as my body could produce. In a store that quiet at that hour, it carried everywhere. I wrenched my arm free and ran toward the front of the store. Behind me, she called out, first telling me to come back, then my name, clearly, precisely. The name I had never once given her. I didn't stop running. A coworker heard me from 2 aisles over and came at a sprint. I told him to call security without slowing down. By the time I reached the front of the store, my legs were shaking badly enough that I had to hold the customer service counter to stay upright. Security found neither of them in the building. The footage told the full story. They had entered together. The man positioned himself to keep me occupied and slightly unsettled while the woman moved into place behind me. Her face was angled away from every camera she passed near. His was not. Every movement they made in that store had been coordinated in advance. They had walked through it before, probably more than once. They knew which areas had cameras and which didn't. They knew the route to the exit and how long it would take to walk me there if the approach worked. The police called it a failed abduction attempt. That phrase sat with me for a long time. Failed. As if the only variable that made it fail was the fact that I screamed at the right moment. 10 more seconds of hesitation and I would have been at that exit door. But what I cannot stop thinking about is my name. Not the man. Not the route. Not even the grip. My name spoken clearly by a woman I had never met in a store I had worked in for 2 years. She had not learned it that night. She had known it before she walked in, which means someone had looked into me. Someone had made a decision about me before that shift even started and then sent 2 people into my workplace to execute a plan built specifically around who I was and where I would be standing. I was not a random opportunity. I was homework. The man's face was clear on camera. As of now, no one has been identified. The woman's face never appeared on a single frame. I still work at the store. Different section, different shift. More people around at all times. But I check the aisle behind me constantly now. Every single time I look up, I check it. I don't know what I expect to find there. Maybe nothing. Maybe the same stillness that was there before all of this. Maybe someone who already knows my name,